Carol, why Canada? What does Canada offer you? You live there, you travel from there.
I'm
from
Canadian.
Yesterday.
I mean, I'm Canadian, and I like being a Canadian, and I did consider moving to the States. I thought about New York for a while as opposed to Los Angeles. I didn't like Los Angeles that much. But I like working in Canada. I like the fact that I started when the Canadian film business was very small. There were not many films being made, a few little ones. And I sort of feel like I've helped to build the Canadian film industry. It's not a big industry, but it's ours.
Yeah.
And it's probably not an American film industry. We don't make American films. We make a lot of American films in Canada, and we make Toronto look like New York, and we make Toronto look like Chicago, and Vancouver look like Seattle.
Because it's cheaper, no?
Because it's cheap.
No?
Yes, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And so the Americans come to Canada to shoot. Same way the Americans go to Prague and to Budapest, and the tax incentive. It's attractive.
But you never were, intrigued by Hollywood. I mean, you're a big name, and certainly there would be offers for you.
There have been, but I like living in Canada.
You're not going.
And I can go to work in the States. I've gotten work permits to work there, so I can live where I want to live, and I can work where I want to work. I would probably rather work in Europe than I'd rather work in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and you run a family business with your partner James McAfee.
That's right.
Yeah, he's in the back, by the way.
Well, if he hasn't gone to get a beer somewhere,
well, he waves at you. Maybe we have a look. Yeah. He's close to the beer. He was offered to have a seat in the front row, but he's over there. Maybe we'll ask him a question during the afternoon. Yeah. And you also thought of going to Europe one day, or at least you thought of being here as a professional.
I did. But as I said, I think I would rather come here. If I were going to live somewhere else other than Canada, I think I would rather be somewhere in Europe because I think our sensibility to film is more European than it is American. Yeah. And I just like being in European countries as opposed to going to Miami or something. It's not my favorite place.
I can imagine. But were you focused on becoming a professional in the movie industry from the early days, or what kind of education did you have?
Well, I studied interior design. I had started out was going to study architecture, and then they changed the course, and I didn't like the new course, so I went into the interior design course thinking I could see which direction I wanted to go in design, because I still wasn't really that sure when I was in school. And as I got to the end, I thought maybe I would get into campus planning, and I was going to do a master's in that. But then I took a year off, and during that
campus planning,
designing universities.
Designing universities.
Yeah. So I took a year.
That's a specialism in North America.
Well, it was at that point because in that point there were a lot of universities being built. Probably not as many now as there were then. And then I took a year off to work and was working on some campus planning in an architect's office, and I started doing theater on the side, and I thought, wow, this is fun. this is more fun than sitting at a drawing board drawing, details of mechanical drawings. And so I started doing that on the side, and then after a while it was starting to take over. I was taking more of my time, and then I got involved in a film. Yeah. And I thought, wow.
What was that first movie?
It was a very early Canadian film. Nobody's probably ever heard of it. It was called The Morning Suit.
One more time.
The Morning Suit.
The Morning Suit. Who has heard of The Morning Suit?
Nobody,
in the
I'm
audience? Sure. No one of you.
It was made in
be shy.
1976.
76. Yeah. Was the education as an interior designer, was that profitable for you to first enter the world of the theater and later on the movies?
It's a good background because it was a very good design school. I mean, it was probably one of the better schools in Canada for interior design. It was part of the Faculty of Architecture, and the first year was basic architecture or in design, and a lot of history of architecture and design, and we did a little bit of industrial design and a little bit of graphic design. It was an all-around course, and then focused on the interior design and designing interior spaces. Yeah. So it was a good background, really good background. Yeah. One of my first profs in design wasn't even an architect or an interior designer. He was a painter. So you got a lot of an all-around kind of background. Yeah, and I think nowadays a lot of your younger colleagues are all specialists, trained as specialists. Is that true or not? Some are specialists, but specialists in different fields. I mean, people come into production design from all areas. I mean, a lot of people come through theater. They've started in theater. Some are architects. A lot of architects. Yeah. Some because they go into architecture thinking they're going to be able to design big buildings and become the next high-end pay or something.
Finally, they're going to build a building.
And they find that they're just one of many people working in an office, and then that they can be more expressive, and they tend to move into film.
Yeah. Well, that's of course a very stupid question for a lot of you, but what is the difference between set design and production design?
Well, production design is the overall look of the film. It's everything, and then underneath the production design. I mean, it's a very collaborative art department. You have the production designer who oversees everything and works with the costume designers and the special effects, and then underneath that you have an art director who you have a supervising art director who mainly keeps control of the budget. Then you have art directors that deal with different parts of the sets, and the set designers are what used to be draftsmen, and they would do the drawings, and then they gradually the name changed from draftsman or assistant art director to set designer, and they're the ones that do the drawings. Used to be on a drawing board, now it's all on a computer.
I have a few students of myself in the audience, and they're trained as industrial engineers. They want to become a car designer or whatever. What is your advice for them? Suppose after seeing these splendid pieces of movie, to become a colleague of you, what do they have to do?
Well, I imagine if they're car designers, they're very good illustrators.
But I mean, car designer is something in the future, but they're trained as almost general industrial designers. They buy a ticket to you, or they buy a ticket to Hollywood. I don't know what, but
I think you do what everybody does that wants to get into film. You just start pounding the pavement. You find people that are doing it, and you volunteer your time. That's how I started. I did a lot of volunteer work when I started. You have to go in knowing that you still have things to learn, because you've got to apply what you already know to a new discipline.
And what are the skills that the movie industry is looking after?
I'm sorry.
What are the skills the movie industry is looking after?
Things that you have to learn once you get in. You have to learn the fact that you might be designing this glass, but you also, or this room, but you also have to design this room to work for the camera angles, because you're always going to be looking at it through a lens. You're never looking at it the way we're looking at it with our eyes. You're looking at it through a frame, and you have to think about things about how the camera's going to move. Does that wall have to blow up? Does the ceiling have to collapse? Does the floor have to collapse? Do we have to make the wall go away so we can put the camera there?
Not particularly knowledgeable. An architect has, no? The other way around.
Yes, exactly. So there, those things that you learn as you're going on, because I mean most people come into it, they don't. But there aren't that many schools where you learn those kind of things. So you learn by working your way up within an art department. It's a learn as you go. At
what stage during a production do you enter the production? Is it right from the beginning? For instance, I presume you talk to producers and directors.
Oh, right. The production designer is one of the first people to come in. I've come into a film before a producer in one case, because of directors brought me in, and then they brought the producer in later. And you're there right from the beginning, and now with the larger films, sometimes you don't even have a script when you come in, because you're still working out what the whole film is.
And maybe you can give an example. I mean, no doubt that you start a new production in this period of time, or many. Some are insecure. I always hear, and many movies are insecure until the day they are released. But
it's true. You mean financially insecure?
Financially, but maybe you can give
Well, normally, right now, for example, I'm working on budgets on a film and a little bit of research. I'm not getting paid because they're independent films. I mean, if you're working on a big Hollywood picture, they'll bring you in for a pre-production, and they'll pay you because they're like the $200 million pictures. The lower
this is
budgets.
A no cure, no pay phase of the production.
And so you work on the budgets and. So that they can get the financing.
Tell us a little bit more about that movie. I know it's
which one?
Well, you just had one in your head, and you were not going to mention because it's a secret, of course. But what might have been in the cinema in 2 years' time you worked on? That
I've just finished, or that I'm hoping to work on?
Going to start.
Well, I'm budgeting right now for another Cronenberg movie.
Movie. And what's the title of the movie?
It probably will change. David's he never likes to.
What's the working
Well,
title?
it's actually Eastern Promises. It's Eastern Promises too. So it's a continuation of the story of Eastern Promises. So hopefully, if we get the budget worked out, and Vigo is in, he likes the new script, and if everything works out, we'll be shooting it in the fall.
Yeah, the same guy is coming to us again in the cinema. Right, I have, that's also a student of mine, somewhere in the audience. Her name is Liselot Franken from Design Cultures in Amsterdam, and she has a question for you.
I was wondering if it can be said that your work is more about observing the world around you than that it's about personal creativity.
I suppose there's always a little, you like to put your own stamp on it, so you have a little bit of the personal creativity in it, but you have to take into consideration a lot more things than what you like, because there might be a character in the script that lives in a space that you would never design, because it's bad design. So you find yourself designing bad design, which is kind of a weird place to be, but it does happen. Or you're designing, and then sometimes you have a place like this room where you want to turn it into something else. So you're taking the elements that are already there and making them work for something else. I mean, it's. I don't know if that answers your question.
You had a part B of your question, Liselot, and that sounds like design is about choice. How do you choose?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
What do you mention by that? I mean, it sounds intriguing, but...
I think the character makes you choose.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah. You spend a lot of time at the beginning when you're reading your scripts deciding who the characters are, where they came from, a whole background story on them, where they, what they do, where they live. Even if you don't see their living space, you still kind of work it out in your head where they would live. How do they live? How do they keep their clothes? How do they brush their teeth? How do they, what do they do? Is their place a mess? Is it, and you develop this whole character, which then you work that with the actors too when they come in, and that defines their space, and the space that they're in, and where they work, and where they live, and who they interact with. So the character development is a huge part of the design of a film. It also works with the costumes too. I mean, probably more so with the costumes because that's more intimate. That's what they're wearing.
Do you work at an early stage with models, or is everything on the computer, or you still work with pencils, or how do you
It
do
depends.
that?
Each film is a little different. The bigger films, the huge films, now they're all on with the computer because you do a lot of storyboarding, a lot of pre-visualization. Each scene is worked out and it's pre-visualized. You have these little characters moving through these little spaces that are similar to what you're going to be building or developing digitally.
Yeah.
Because if you have $200 million that you're spending, they want to know that it's going to work at the beginning. Yeah. And also, sometimes with those films, they don't always have a script when you start. And you're working out what's going to happen, and part of that happens when you're doing your pre-visualization. A smaller, more intimate film is a little different. You spend a little more time just talking one-on-one. We do a lot of computer models, like SketchUp models, but it's still nice to have in front of you a three-dimensional foam core model that directors can look at and move around and see, without having to look over somebody's shoulder at a computer image.
Yeah, that's the director side to it. But you and James told me horrible stories about the talks with the producers nowadays.
Oh, the budgeting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess budget is a problem no matter what you're designing. You always have budget problems, and some producers are wonderful to work with. They understand it because they come more from a creative producing. They're more creative producers, and they also they understand that we don't have the money to do this, but maybe if we do something else. Then you get some of the newer producers that are coming more from accounting that just don't understand how much things are, why you have to do. They don't understand what you need to do to make a film work, and that becomes a problem. But you work it out. You have
and
to.
And what do you do to tell them we really need this or we really need that? I mean, finally you got to talk about the model or about.
Yeah, I guess that you try and convince them, which is the best thing to do. In most cases, it's the director that finally has the say, because unless it's television. Television is a little different. Television, it's the producers that run the show. In film, luckily, the director is still the final person. He's the person whose image and vision it is to make the film, and they usually have the final say. And the director will fight. If he's a strong director, he'll fight for what he wants.
Do you consider yourself a commercial artist? Do you consider yourself an independent artist?
I think I'm probably more of an independent artist. I tend to like the smaller films better. I like the films that are more intimate. They're harder to do because you don't get the budgets to do. I think even independent films have to have a little bit of commercial to it in order to sell the picture. You want people to see it. You don't want it to just sit on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, it has to be made also.
So they still have to have a little bit of commercial. And, a good art film is nice to see.
Yeah. Well, I remember your work and Cronenberg's work. Well, I think from the early 80s. What hugely impressed me and my friends was Videodrome. And I remember staying at home to watch Videodrome on the television, and we didn't went to a bar because, well, that's what we regularly did when we were students. No, we stayed at home maybe 2 or 3 times. Why do you think a movie like that, or especially Videodrome, but also The Fly, I think, communicated that it had some kind of underground feel or some kind of cult status? You're talking about the independency of your work and independency of film. What is that character?
I don't know. I think maybe Videodrome at the time was new. It was also the Oblivion character was kind of a Marshall McLuhan character. He's based on a real person. Yeah. It's hard to say. I guess because it wasn't the mainstream film, people just were attracted to it. Also, David had started to establish himself as a director who had a vision that was a little more away from the norm, and it was a fun picture to work on. I looked at it recently because I had to find some photographs and I couldn't find any, so I had to do screen captures. And I hadn't seen it for a long time, and I looked through it and I thought, it actually holds up fairly well, except for a few of the design things that are a little dated.
Like what? The television?
I like the spectacular optical trade show. I thought, oh my goodness, we did that. But
if I remembered well, we didn't know who Cronenberg was in 83, I think. Of course, we were in love with Debbie Harry, but we were hugely impressed by the visual power. Yeah. That's what I remember.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with David too. It was his script. He wrote the script, and his scripts. He's not a visual person in terms of that he does a lot of drawings and sketches or anything like that, but he's a very cerebral person, and his scripts are very descriptive. Mm-hmm. You read the script and you visualize right away what it's going to look like, and I think that comes through in all of his films. They all have that look without him sitting down and doing little sketches or. Yeah. And he's so articulate and verbal that he's able to impart to you what he envisions and how he wants to see the film.
Yeah, but how did he communicate the idea of Videodrome? The storyline is, well, at least to me, quite complicated. He must have had an idea of how it looked. He has an intellectual perspective on it. He's talking about, well, I heard him talking about the Marshall McLuhan thing all the time. Yeah. How did he communicate to you about all the things he wanted? One question at a time. For instance, the Marshall McLuhan. How did he?
Marshall McLuhan is. To us. We grew up. That was our generation. We read, his books. We knew who he was.
Did you really understand him?
Probably not. Probably not. But we were trying to. We were trying to understand. We were trying to create these characters and make them real. A character who wasn't even a real person other than on screen, on a video television screen. Yeah. I don't know. You just get so absorbed when you're working with David, and you just feel, you just become part of the film as you're shooting it. It's just like you live it.
Yeah, you live it. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. well, that's video, and nowadays I think you have to make references to the game world. I mean, you have to, well, to deal in many aspects with the world of game, I think.
Yeah.
And to the digital world. I have a question from Romke Faber, but I'm not very sure he's in the house. Romke Faber, that's you. You sent me many questions, by the way. You sent me something like 20. You wanted to be sure that you were able to ask a question.
I was asked to send in 3 questions.
Yeah, but you sent more. But that's no problem. At least I have one here that refers to Eastern Promises and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And you want to compare them. Maybe you can ask the question.
I'm wondering about the influence of digital technologies on the production process as a whole and your role specifically. So, for instance, was there a different approach to the design process for Eastern Promises in comparison to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and how could you elaborate on that?
Totally different. They were totally different. Eastern Promises was, for one thing, a David Cronenberg film, and David does not like storyboards. He's not one to be pinned down. He likes to be able to work with his actors on the set and figure out how he's going to shoot it. So we never have any storyboards on his films. So when you're working with David, you sit down and you again, you work through the characters and who the characters are, where they came from. In Eastern Promises, of course, we were trying to working out who all of these Russian people were that are in London, have come from Russia, what their lives are like, what kind of surroundings they live in. With the prisons, we did a lot of research on the Russian tattoos that come from the prisons. It's a more intimate kind of approach. Then we designed the spaces to fit the people, the characters in the film. And in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, it was a comic book. It was a graphic novel. So it was a little more fantasy. You're not putting people into real spaces, although you try to research it so you know what the spaces look like, but it's still not real. It's all comic book. It's all fantasy. And you're dealing with a lot of storyboards. Everything is storyboarded. There are a lot of illustrators and conceptual artists that work out sets, that you work with them, and they're doing all kinds of drawings, and because a lot of it becomes a digital effect in the end, and it's all created in a computer. So you're not physically building the spaces. So the only way you can really show it is with the computer designs and the pre-visualizations. And we didn't do as many pre-visualizations then because that was still at the beginning of it, and they weren't doing that many previs then. But it's a different approach, and that's, I guess, why this new 5D approach that Alex McDowell is doing is becoming more popular, because it's more geared to the larger films and films where you have all those other disciplines. You have the animation and the digital and the interactive design. So I don't know, does that answer the question between the two?
The approach from McDowell.
Yeah.
That's also. Could you also use it on a film like Eastern Promises to create that world? I mean,
not with David. Not with David Cronenberg, because of his lack of wanting to do storyboards, and he doesn't really get that involved in wanting to previs scenes. He doesn't want to see little stick people, computer-generated people running through a computer-generated space ahead of time. He wants to work with his actors. He has a very close tie with his actors, and works with them. From pre-production, they start talking. They talk about who the characters are. Like David and Viggo, for instance, they spend hours and emailing each other and talking on the phone. And Viggo gets very involved in who they are. And for Eastern Promises, he took a couple of trips to Moscow and just drove around Russia, trying to get the feel of being Russian. Yeah. And the cigarette, and then he came back with a suitcase full of stuff for me. Chocolate bars and cigarettes and all kinds of things that he thought I should see. So you wouldn't do that with a larger picture. I don't think you'd ever see that happen. I mean, maybe if Viggo were doing a big picture, it might. But
yeah. But do you prefer one of the approaches?
It's hard. I think you have to use the the big approach, the 5D kind of approach, if you're doing a larger picture, I think it's the only way that you can do it. You have to, because you're involving all these people, you're involving all of the visual effects, and there's so much digital work. With a small picture like Eastern Promises, I know that Alex McDowell says that you can use that same approach on a small picture, but I personally think that, for one thing, you wouldn't have a visual effects department unless it's very small, because you couldn't afford it. You wouldn't have the money to do the pre-visualization unless you had somebody that was willing to give you free time. So it's the same, but it's a little different. You're working with a model, a three-dimensional paper model instead of, and you try and make as much, decisions ahead of time as that you need to in terms of building sets in case you have to blow up a wall or take a wall away from a set. You have to plan that ahead of time. And then with David, you plan everything. You just hope that you've got everything that he needs on the day. Because there's been a time when I haven't, and I've had to throw things together at the last minute.
Give an example.
I guess on History of Violence, we had a small hospital set. And we didn't have a lot of money to build that, but we had a small hospital set where Viggo's in the hospital and his wife comes in to see him after she's found out about his background. And we had made the set just a simple room with a door into the hospital room. I had another door just for access to the crew that we set that we could assume that was leading to a bathroom. They're rehearsing it. I had gone back up to my office. They were rehearsing it, and all of a sudden, Maria Bello decided that she wanted to throw up in the bathroom sink. Of course, when she opened the door to the bathroom, there's the sound man sitting there with his sound equipment. So I got this phone call from David saying, Peter has to light the set. It's probably going to take him an hour and a half. Can you throw a bathroom together for us? So we were running around trying to find sets and, flats and sinks, and we did. We threw a bathroom together. But, so things like that happen.
Cronenberg is also notorious for using a 360 degrees angle. I read somewhere at least.
Yeah, well, you plan for 360 degrees.
Yeah.
He doesn't always shoot 360 degrees. You plan because you don't know. The actors come in and they walk from here to here, and then all of it he shoots, and you never see this wall. You think, well, he could have saved a little bit of money there, but you can't do that with David. We've built big sets and not seen all of them. In Naked Lunch, we built a huge marketplace with Moroccan market with them walking through. I think you see a little section of it, and that's it.
Some directors say that you feel the rest.
But we had a fun building it. It was great to build.
Yeah. Good commission. Romke, is that all you have to ask?
Yeah.
No, you had another question about what Carol was just mentioning about the idea of 5D.
Yeah.
And until quite recently, I didn't know what it was, and Carol explained to me. But maybe you can ask your question.
So, you are familiar with the idea of 5D, immersive design and world building by McDowell. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about your thoughts about 5D and immersive design, the idea of world building with in the end, a whole crew just trying to create a whole world, a narrative world, with its own logic and geography and everything, so that the filmmakers as a whole can take their story out from that world and make that into a film. That's about my question.
Okay, I'm trying to. I'm assuming that you're thinking that it's a larger film, like a $200 million film or something that is. Yeah. Sometimes they don't always have the script when they start.
Yeah, well, as I understand, I've been to the 5D conference and talked with McDowell a bit about it. Yeah. And as I understand it, he's saying we're just building a narrative world in a narrative space or in a digital space. And from that, we can make the film. And it's applicable for the big films, but also for the smaller films.
It is applicable for both films. I think that, but like I said, that you don't always have the resources in a smaller film to do all of the previs and digital. I think that personally, just for me, I think it applies more to the larger films. I like and maybe it's just because I started long before computers, and that was more my background. If you're on a smaller film, I think it's more intimate, and I think you don't have as many people involved as you would have in a, you don't have the people from animation and from the previs and from the digital. You don't have all those disciplines. involved. It goes back to the director, the cinematographer, and the production designer, and they're the three key creative people in the film, and you work together to make the look, and you create that world. It's all collaboration. I mean, I guess that's where it's the same. Is that if it's a small film, it's a collaboration still, but it's on a much smaller scale. When you get into those larger films, you have a lot of people. You might have, 15 or 16 illustrators or concept designers working. You might have 6 or 7 storyboard artists working, and they're all. It's just like you, and you're trying to keep control over everybody, because that's what you do as a production designer. You're sort of working with all of them, so it's not as intimate anymore. So I think that personally, that's why I prefer the smaller films.
Yeah.
So, and I think I think you are using the same methods. It's just a different explanation of it, and a different. I think it's still the same. It's you don't have all the tools that you do on the big films, but you're still approaching it in a similar method without the tools. I don't know if that answers it or not.
Yeah, but your role as a production designer hasn't changed with the influence of all those digital technologies, like the whole coming of a visual effects department, who is also working on the image and putting elements in the image after you've done your work?
No, it hasn't changed the role. It's just, like I said, it's just a bigger scale. It's
Okay.
a bigger scale with more people involved in the collaboration.
Thank you.
Maybe to finalize this talk, I really want to talk to you about, or with you about realism, about how to achieve a certain kind of reality, because in one way or the other, movie is about reality, or the suggestion of reality. It's my belief that, well, the world, maybe architects, maybe designers, learned from the movie business how to design sets. I mean, if you walk around Rotterdam, and you've been here about 20 or 30 years ago, and James told me, well, it changed dramatically. And in my opinion, well, more or less, we walk in a film set of modernism. And we make our people who live here and the tourists suggest that this is a city full of, harbor activity and industrial atmosphere, but it's make-believe. What are your, well, it's a stupid thing to ask, but what are your tricks for make-believe in the movie? How do you start to make us believe what the movie is all about and become part of the world we're looking at?
You mean in terms of how we approach the design? Or
how do you approach the design? And for instance, if you go look at a set and you want to use a decor or no building, or maybe a building like this, what are the characteristics? What are the values of space?
Well, I mean, after you've gone through what the script requires and what your requirements are in terms of who the characters and everything, when you decide that this space, you're either looking for a location. Usually, if it's a huge space and it's a lower budget, you're looking for a location, a location that has something that's interesting to start with. Sometimes it's just something that's a shell, and then you can build within that, because you don't want to have to build the whole thing. I guess you look for just either depending on the movie, you either want something that has very modern spaces, or you want something that has incredible textures, peeling paint, or different levels, different heights, and because it's one flat space can sometimes be quite boring. It's much more interesting if you have higher, areas where you can put the camera and look down or look up and see different levels. There's different. I mean, I guess there's a million things that you take into consideration when you're choosing it.
I have a student here. I think she's in front. It's Anna van Oppen, and she has a question about reality.
My question is, what do you consider are the most important differences and similarities when you are designing a reality in a film compared to when you, like where Timo referred to, are designing a reality in real life?
In real life. Well, when you're designing something in real life, it has to last for a long time, or you expect that it's going to last for a long time, and it has to serve usually more than one purpose. It doesn't have, and again, it doesn't have to have, for a film, that same space might, as I said before, the wall might have to blow out. So you have to be able to build that wall so that the special effects people can come in and rig it so that on cue it can blow up, or the windows can collapse, or the floor can collapse. Or maybe you have to do a very quick changeover. Maybe it's a room like this, and then we have to come back and shoot in a couple of days, and we have to make this space look like a fire has happened in here. And the ceiling is maybe partially burnt out, and the walls are all charred, and the chairs are melted, and so you have to take that into consideration. When you're building for real, you have to take into consideration building codes, and which we usually don't have to. We also don't have to take into consideration the fact that it has to live for a long time. The marble is not real marble; it's fake marble. The granite's fake. The stone walls are not real stone; they're plaster. And there are a lot of tricks that you have for film that certainly would never last very long if you had to build it. In some ways, I guess that you can do more when you're with a lot less money because you're not building it for real. We also don't have the time to build things for real. You have very limited time. Sometimes you have a couple of weeks and you have to put a set together, and you don't have the time to do the feasibility studies about how something would work if you did it this way or if you did it that way, or okay, this is the design, this is what we're going with. We have to have it done in a week. So, is that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, talking about reality, I think one of the intriguing topics in your movies, so to say, or Cronenberg's movies, and I presume both of you, is a topic of the subject of technology and how you treat the idea of technology. Mm-hmm. You could say the normal world, technology is about, technology is clean. With an Apple computer over there, an Apple computer is clean, and technology is about progress, about a better world, but not in your world. I think technology is dirty. Technology is scary. Technology changes in organic stuff.
Well, in a Cronenberg word, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, more than a part of it.
I don't know how to really answer that one. I really don't know exactly.
For instance, who invented the surgical instruments?
Oh, the surgical instruments.
Well,
yeah.
in that it's in Dead Ringers, no? Yeah.
Yeah, in Dead Ringers, we wanted to have scary-looking instruments, and we looked through catalogs. We looked through catalogs of every single instrument that's used in surgery, and actually some of the more scary ones were actually dental. Which, I guess it's because it's coming at your mouth, and everybody hates going to the dentist. And we looked at, so we took little bits from the dental ones, and then we thought, well, we have to make them look more organic, because David likes more organic things. So then we looked at bones, and we looked at different, body parts and that. And we thought, well, if you take this instrument and you put this bit of bone on the end of it, and then you give it all to a jeweler, and they turn it all into a piece of jewelry, which becomes the instrument. That was kind of how it all evolved.
Yeah. And do you have, can I conclude, not only those surgical instruments, but also the typewriter, for instance, or the organic gun in eXistenZ.
Yeah.
Do you have more or less not so much a negative, but kind of distorted idea about the world? Is it good? Is it? Well, no, distorted is not a good. It's not a good expression, but it's not explicitly a positive idea about the world. Things can go wrong all the time.
They definitely do. Yeah, especially in film. I mean, there's always something going wrong. In terms of the typewriters?
Yeah, I mean, if you look,
did they go wrong? They just turned into weird creatures.
If I look at that organic gun, that's so scary.
Yeah, it becomes part of your hand too.
Yeah.
That's David working very closely with the prosthetic people. I get involved in how they have to work with, how it has to work on the set.
Yeah.
But in most cases, it's David getting involved with the prosthetic people. With the typewriters, I looked for really, interesting typewriters of the period. Ones that were not just your ordinary typewriters. And there are some really very strange typewriters that were on the market at that time and earlier. And then we took those, and then they were developed into the creatures. And that comes more from the creature designers that work with the prosthetic people.
Well, maybe finalizing this one, and before asking you whether you have a good advice for the youngsters here and what kind of movies you're going to see in Rotterdam, maybe we have some question in the audience, other than the students who prepared a question. There's one over there, the lady with the scarf.
I was wondering what your own house looks like. If you put any of the set,
That's very
incorporated
personal.
in your house.
That's very personal.
We have a very
If you want to tell
eclectic
us.
house.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's very eclectic. It has the collections of everything in it. Because I have old toys, because I love old toys. I love the colors of them. My husband has collections of everything. And every film, you walk around our house and we think, oh, that was a little bit from that film, and that was a little bit from that film. And for a while, we had a barn full of set pieces until I finally got rid of it 2 years ago because they were starting to deteriorate. So our house is very eclectic, and it's the kind of house that you can walk around in and then walk around in the same room, a day later or an hour later, and you see things that you missed the first time. I do it all the time.
All the time.
Except when I have to dust it.
Thank
More
you.
questions, maybe a little less private. Over here, please. Yes?
Yeah. Have you designed realities that you later on saw coming back in interior design magazines? So actually, you kind of set the trend for stuff to filter down in the real reality again.
I don't know if I've ever seen them come back in design magazines. I have built things that people have kept. I mean, for the Dead Zone, we built a gazebo that a girl was murdered in near the lake. And the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is near Niagara Falls, decided that they liked this gazebo so well that they decided to keep it. It's now still there, and we built that in, I think, 1979. It's still there. They've put a new roof on it because we had fake copper on the top. It wouldn't have lasted very long. And now it's on the covers of all their tourist magazines, so as if it's been there for centuries. So, but as for design, no, I don't know that subway station would, although, there might be elements, I don't. But I've never seen anything come back in a design magazine. Well, it would be fun to do that, to see that.
The other way around.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Because I look at design magazines and think, oh, that's lovely. Maybe I'll incorporate it in a film.
I think you're one of the person that, I think more on a general level, that promoted, the beauty of those kind of interiors. Mm-hmm. At least that's you, for me.
Yeah.
You're one of the people that learn
the texture
that's beautiful. I think that's why we're here now.
I know.
Look around.
True. Yeah.
Maybe more questions.
Yes.
Over here, one. Over in the back. Man with the hat over there. No? Oh, sorry.
She's got-
Microphone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You said that you started your design thinking, starting with the characters, basically how they would live and dress and what their life would be. Does that also, your design thinking and design, does it also influence the script of the film? Do you change sort of the storyline or change the...
It does happen, yes. Quite often, actually. You'll be working with it, and they'll just, especially David, he likes to change things if it's not a script that he's written from the beginning. Quite often something will be written for a specific location, and as you're looking for locations, you'll come across something that is quite wonderful, whether it's a space like that's deteriorating or it's a beautifully designed space, and you think, oh, we have to incorporate this into the film somehow, and then the script will be rewritten. We'll think, oh, well, that scene can take place somewhere else. It can take place, in that wonderful, open air space or in that old factory. So it does. Things do change. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. In the back, I saw a finger. Over here.
Nope.
My name is Jan Doens. I'm a big fan of fantastic cinema, and you have worked a lot with David Cronenberg and Guillermo del Toro. In my opinion, two of the most visionary filmmakers in fantastic cinema of our generation. And so I want to thank you as much as them for the beautiful films you've given us.
Wow, that's good.
And my question is, do you have a special preference of working for as a production design on fantastic cinema or fantastic films?
They're always a challenge. They're always wonderful to work on because you can be more open, and you're designing maybe a reality that's your version of the reality. You can be a little more expressive. You can exaggerate things more if it's fantastic cinema, if as opposed to an intimate real world space. Is your question pertaining to David's pictures as opposed to Guillermo's pictures, or?
Well, actually, both of them are very have a great vision, I think, and very functional production design.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine that for you as a production designer, it's a big challenge to help create their worlds as opposed to more realistic worlds.
Yeah, they both have they're very different approaches to making a film. But in some ways, they're very similar, and they both have a great respect for each other too. I mean, they talk to each other, and they have respect for what the other person is. I know that Guillermo was a big fan of David's when he was starting, and whether he influenced him in his work, I've never asked him, but they're both amazing to work with because they have a vision. Which they both approach from a different point of view, but they both have a vision of their films, and they're not mainstream. They're not boring.
Definitely.
So I love working with both of them. Yes.
Thank you very much.
In the middle over there, the lady.
Hi, Carol.
Hello.
I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about how you work with the director of photography in pre-production, maybe even before they've even come on board, how you imagine the light in your sets, and a little bit about
One
that.
has to work really closely with the director of photography because the director of photography is either going to make or break your work, and likewise your work is going to make or break his work because you have to be able to supply a set that he can practically light. So we do work very closely, and also we work very closely in color too. Some directors of photography they will totally hate anything that's white because it's hard to light. It's not the easiest thing to light, and they want everything to be like dark as those walls. And these white walls they would have a fit if you did them. But then other directors, these mainly the younger ones, I think maybe because they're starting to do more digital and it's not as difficult. They're more willing to work with lighter colors and dark. But you have to work very closely with a DP, as I say, because they will make your sets look beautiful or not. So it's a collaboration. It's definitely a collaboration.
And you obviously think hard about where to put the practical lights and
definitely.
where the windows are.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, some DPs they like an overabundance of practical lights. I mean, so you might have a table lamp there and another one here and another one over here, which in reality you would never see, but that's the way they like to light. And you also like to have a good supply of different lights that they can choose from on the day too, in case they say, I hate that light, or I don't like that shade. Can you change it? But it's definitely a collaboration.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Carol just whispered that she really wants a beer, so I think one final question over here.
I was wondering, do you have any personal favorites with respect to movies, excluding your own work, with regard to production design, of course?
In terms of genre movies?
Or just in general. But what movies are quintessential? You say, wow, this is really exceptional production design. But I just want to exclude your own work because
even other people's work.
to avoid.
I don't know. I think I probably just like a film that I can go and I can be totally immersed in and become part of, and not start picking it apart. Because I figure if I'm picking a film apart, it's not a very good movie to start with. You know, you want something that you know. I mean, obviously, if there's a beautiful camera movement, I'm going to see it. But and I'm going to come out saying, "Oh, the production design was amazing." But I'm hoping that while I'm there watching the film, that I'm watching the story, and not looking at the details. I mean, I'll go back maybe another time if I want to, and then I can start looking at the details. But I like to be immersed in the film and become part of it.
Maybe one last question from me. What kind of movie are you going to see? Are you going to watch some movies in Rotterdam?
There's a whole. I've got 2 days. I'm not going to see.
No, you're in trouble.
I'm in trouble. And the one I wanted to see tomorrow afternoon, apparently we have an interview, so I'm not going to be able to see it. So I'm hoping it'll come to Toronto, but maybe for a TIFF or something. But there's a couple of good ones, and there's some lovely short ones that I would like to see too. But I'm not going to have time to. Just not going to have time.
We want to thank you for this afternoon, Carol, and maybe a warm hand for Carol Spier, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Carol, I want to invite you for a drink. It's over there.
Fantastic.
Maybe gentlemen, ladies, you can have a drink also.
Thank you
maybe
very much.
Also on behalf of the Premsela organization, thank you very much for being here.